So we live in a world that is always changing and full of people who have their own opinions and want to follow the ways of their own. So a constitution had to be made to bring these people together and to create a more perfect union. So some important people created the Federalist Papers, which was put together of 85 essays, and to urge the New York people to put the Constitution, and the people who made the Constitution was, or who mainly made the Constitution was Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay was another one. And those people made the Constitution to bring the people of the United States together. So not all of the Federalist ideas made it into the Constitution, but it was enough to urge the New Yorkers to put it into play. Reading where I went here. Can I check it really quick because I totally forgot.
That's all right. Yeah. Quick look.
Okay. So, to bring the Constitution together, it takes everyone, and you can't just follow your own ways in what you want to do, which is what people have been doing a lot. And there are two different parties that have been formed, which is Democracy and Republican. And I'm not really sure, I don't really understand those, but I know those are the two that have been put together. And even though you may think that you can't, like, just you making a change won't help other people, but it does, because it encourages others when they see you. And in the Article 14, Article 27, one of those, it states that if you're born in the United States, you are a citizen and are given the rights, but that also means you have to follow the laws of the United States. So when you don't follow those laws, it can create disagreements and tear apart the Constitution. But so we have to follow the laws that have been given to us, and yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Hello.
We're clapping for you.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Stay up there. Stand. Yep. Stand.
Wow.
Stand tall.
It's so hot here.
You have to redo it because
I'm sweating.
No.
I'm so
Am I in your spot?
stressed out.
So she.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All
Whose
right.
shoe is it?
Super comfortable. All right. Good job. It's always hard to go first, and so you did really well.
Thanks.
Continue to be confident in what you're saying. I chose you, by the way, first for a very specific reason. And so, because you tend to be more of the temperament that is laid back and sits back and observes, which is not a bad temperament to have. But I really want to encourage you in your voice, because every time you speak with a lot of insight. And I think your essay was really well laid out. I think your presentation was well thought out. It lacked confidence, which comes with time, and so that's not a critique. But I want to encourage you. You had it. You didn't really need to look at your notes. You had it. And so again, whenever, and this is geared towards everyone, whenever we're speaking, particularly on subjects like this, it's important to just own what you know. And so if you've forgotten about things, that's okay. If you've forgotten about it, likely that wasn't something at the forefront of your mind. So when we speak from authority, in that position of authority, what we don't want to do is start to venture into guessing what it is that we wrote down, right? we want to just stick with what we know. And if that means your essay becomes a 35-second essay, but it's 35 seconds filled with stuff that I know, that is much better than the tendency in our nation, whether it's in politics or just public speaking in general, is that people will speak with that same 30 seconds of passion and authority, and then they'll drone on for 4.5, 5, 10 minutes on a bunch of stuff they're not experts in, or they don't know, or they have opinions on. And that's not what's needed. For the hearer in this position, you're trying to convince me. You will never convince somebody by just kind of floating out ideas that you're not really convinced of yourself. And so my point is excellent job on that. So let me read through, and I'm going to have you stand there.
I'm going to grab my water.
Yeah, sounds good. And I'm going to have you stand there again for a purpose in it, because I want you guys to get comfortable speaking and holding authority. And the way that you posture yourself, the way that you present yourself, is just as critical to having authority in whatever subject that you're discussing. And so, Esther, you have authority and understanding. You are smart, very intelligent, very insightful young lady, extremely insightful, artistic. And so, like your whole Hawaii project was phenomenal. You could tell you had authority because you, in a creative sense, right, you put forward something. Your writing is that same way. It has very, it's more poetic and artistic. And so this was her essay, and then I want to open it up, if we can, to have a question from each person. And so be thinking in terms of that for Esther to try to answer. Living in a world that is always changing, in a place where everyone wants to give their opinion and get what they want, a constitution had to be made to bring together the people of the United States and form a more perfect union. As a citizen of the United States, we have laws to follow and rules to regulate with. Each law was created to make this nation more perfect in its imperfect ways. Before the Constitution was made, the well-known men Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay wrote a collection of 85 essays to urge the New Yorkers to ratify the proposed United States Constitution, which was made by Hamilton, William, and James Madison. These people worked together to make the people of the United States come together and be united. We all play a part in bringing the Constitution together. There were 5 main ideas in the Federalist Papers, which were federalism, checks and balances, separated powers, pluralism, and representation. Though not all of the Federalist ideas made it into the Constitution, it was enough to urge the New Yorkers to ratify it. The Constitution is built up of many rules that all U.S. citizens must follow, yet everyone has their own opinion on what is right, making it much more of a challenge for those who set out the laws. Each law that was made was carefully and thoughtfully thought out, and in order to try to make everyone happy, though not everyone will ever be satisfied. Now, what can we, the people, do to create a more perfect union? Well, if we work together and follow the laws of the Constitution, it does bring the people together. You may think that just you can't make it a change, but you're wrong in thinking that. Because if you're willing to follow the laws and encourage others to do the same, you are helping to grow this Constitution. Article 14 of the 27 Amendments clearly states that if you were born in the United States, you are a citizen, and the rights of the U.S. are given to you. But that also you must follow the laws of the United States. Those who created the Constitution wanted us to all be one, but everyone wants something different. So these days there are 2 different major political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. Democracy includes the freedom of assembly, association, property rights, freedom of religion and speech, inclusiveness and equality, citizenship, and more. Republicanism is generally centered on citizenship in a state-oriented order as a republic, and ranges from the rule of a representative minority or oligarchy to popular sovereignty. Although we all want our ways, it is very important that we follow the law and listen to what it enforces on us. The more we push away and search for our own way, the more it splits up the Constitution, which could lead to war and more disagreements.
job, man.
That's a good one.
The reading.
So obviously I knew nothing about what you were saying. I was, as Emmanuel pointed out, I was just reading it. But there was authority in it. Not because of me, but because of the words that you use. And so this is not my creation, but I owned it in reading it. And so in the same way, when we're speaking publicly, again, now I'm going to reiterate these thoughts again because I really want to drive these home. Take ownership of it. One of the things that I observe in the midst of our people, and with your generation in particular, is at times there tends to be a bent to kind of slide behind the scenes, when really your generation is being called forth. Your voice is being called forth. Your voice in the midst of our people is an extremely vital and important voice. It's necessary for the proper functioning of the culture of God's house. And so, yes, observing, right? Observing our leaders, observing those who have gone before us has an extremely important place. And there is order in that. But order is never designed to quench our ability to present, to communicate. And ultimately, you are not very far removed, your generation is not very far removed from being the ones that are holding the baton and then passing that torch. And so we've talked about this before. Your generation is extremely vital. You're the linchpin, right? You're old enough to have responsibilities and to be in a position of a measure of authority with life experience that is submitted to parents and to elders. But you're also kind of this next generation that is also doing what? You're modeling the types of behavior for those younger ones in our midst. And so your generation is extremely vital. And so I know we're talking about the Constitution, and the reason I bring this up is that generation of people was a linchpin, much like your generation. They were people that were taken out of the kind of the English idea of governance, right, and pushing back against Great Britain and the taxes and the tyranny of King George. And they were trying to form this new ideal. And really in many ways, they're kind of pushing this forward to people who would then hopefully take up the mantle. And so most of those framers who wrote the Constitution, who imagined the Constitution, did not live long enough to really experience the fruits of we the people. Did not experience the fruits of a more perfect union. They did in part. And so, Esther, you're an excellent writer. I want to encourage you to continue to use your voice. You don't have to be outgoing. You can be exactly who God created you to be, which is reserved and quiet. And I'd imagine probably when you're a little more comfortable, she's more talkative.
Mm-hmm.
But how we grow in confidence is taking risks. And your voice matters, young lady. It's extremely valuable. And that's why I think, in large part, why we have this meetings together, not just to talk about history or poetry or whatever. It's to encourage you in the things of the Lord and in the way that He's fashioned you and shaped you. And so I'll get off the soapbox for a second here, and let's open it up to questions or comments.
What's a linchpin means? What's the word linchpin?
Linchpin? It's like something that holds two different things together.
Oh, so.
I have a question. In your essay, you seem to be more factual, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, instead of saying your opinion on it. Is there a reason for that? Or is it just like you decided that you liked that more? Like, you might have given your opinion. I think you did a little bit, but just a question.
Yeah, I wrote down a lot of more constitutional facts in my essay and stuff I could have went into more but didn't have enough time. So I just wrote down my essay and kind of did all that I remembered and stuff up here. But yeah.
Do you find more safety in using proof texts to making your point of view to use this is stated facts?
Mm-hmm.
And so that gives us insight into you as an author. which is a major part of how we verbalize. Because you will likely come from a more grounded and rooted approach and a less emotional approach. Neither are bad. Here's a more logical approach. Good. Other questions, comments, thoughts?
What does like a person or an individual's role look like to you to play out in the Constitution?
I'd say probably because there's obviously adults and stuff are leaders for younger people, and if they choose to do things wrongly, it can cause other people that are growing and watching them to do it as well. So I guess it's targeted more towards adults and stuff that are leading younger people. I don't have a question per se, but I do like how you involved working together as one union and people, because I think that's a very important thing in building a culture, is to really do things as one body and people rather than having and doing things on your own. So I do like how you involved that in the say.
Yeah. Yes, it was really good, and so was the presentation. On the presentation, I think you should have maybe even none of us really have any experience with it, so it makes sense why you're a little unprepared for it. But it's kind of it was kind of like you were reading something to us instead of trying to convince someone. There wasn't much convincing in your speech, which I think your essay did a better job of convincing than your speech did, which is a little difficult because I don't think you practice too much on speaking it, which is difficult for us because we only do stuff like that. But other than that, I think both of them are really good, and you made good points to what we're like trying to correlate to. So
I think Elijah hit on something here. Convincing is for the hearer. Conviction is what comes from the speaker. If you want to convince somebody, you must be convicted, right?
That's right.
And so when you speak, right, I'm speaking with passion. That comes from within me, right? Any good communication is not about what I say. There's plenty of people that say a lot of words. It's what the hearer hears, right? Think about what we're talking about in our Tuesday meetings, right? They're not just words that are going forward, but what is the message? The message is that it needs to be lived out. And so the words, if they're not falling on, the good soil of hearing, then there's an issue, right? And so in any type of public forum, there's two things at play, right? There's always the hearer who needs to hear, who needs to be prepared to hear, who should come with a willing heart, a willing mind, and be open to it. But sometimes as the speaker, your job is to convince, which means that you have to pull the hearer into your sphere, into your conviction, your beliefs structure. And so you've done that in a really ordered way, right? You're using clear, historical. This is what the people were. These are the five main ideas. But you spoke really well. And again, to Naomi's point, there's a couple of things that I'll highlight here that you said. You opened, by the way, both your public speaking the same way that you opened your essay, which is a really good way to start. Living in a world that is always changing, what you did there was make it relatable. Does anyone disagree with that? And so as the hearer, if I make a statement like that can be generalized to everyone, what you're doing is you're pulling the hearer into your orbit, right? You're beginning to convince. And I think Elijah, again, confidence, conviction, all of those things help. And yeah, there's no expectation with being the first one today somebody whose natural tendency is probably not to do public speaking. And if you probably had your choice, you would have just handed in your essay and been fine with it, right? But you have a great deal, young lady, of authority in the words that you've written. It's learning to translate that to not just the written word, but the spoken word. And that's important in life. You might not have to convince anyone of the need for the Constitution, but I would imagine at some point in your life, when the season is here, down the road, that you'll be married, have kids, have other relationships, and your voice matters there. It's really important. And so finding that now, finding the confidence in that, in these awkward times, will better equip you for those seasons ahead. Great job. Any other? Sorry, we didn't get time.
That's okay. That's kind of a challenging question for you. It kind of branches off from ideas in your essay. You mentioned several times the importance of the citizens' obedience to the law, which I assume you are talking about constitutional law and that, so the laws that are laid out by the Constitution. What do you, as the writer, see as more important between two things? First, that the citizen obeys the law, or the freedom that citizen has to choose whether or not to obey the law? What do you see as most important?
It's a very tricky question.
What do you mean? Like, I'm kind of confused.
So, basically, what do you see as more important out of the two that I mentioned? The ability for, or the citizens' obedience of the law, so following essentially what the law says to do, or the freedom that individual or that citizen has to obey the law. He can choose his freedom of choice, or his simply obeying the law. Which do you see as the more important?
I would probably say obeying the law.
Obeying the law? Can you expound on why?
Because if you just get to choose whether you get to follow the law, then it just doesn't really make sense. Because if you choose not to, then you're just following your own ways and separate from everything else
Okay.
in the laws.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Good. Well done. All right, Elijah.
You might want to ask Noah more why he asked that question.
Yeah, right. I think that does bring up a good point for sure, because that there is a real more modern struggle with that very question. Is it more important for me to have the freedom that I can pick, or is it more important to follow what we should? And I think personally, my conviction would be to answer the way that Esther did. It's more important for a healthy union that we submit ourselves than to prop up our own rights. And again, getting back to the framers' intention, never were the framers ever trying to communicate you have personal rights. That was never a constitutional thought process. Our rights were always reflective of we. And so rights properly understood is not I, it's we. I have the right to speak what I want, but that right has to be filtered through the lens of, is it beneficial, right? The Bible talks about this. Things are permissible, but they're not profitable. Well, the framers wanted things that were profitable. In the house of God, we want things that are profitable. It's not just a matter of, can I do this? Should I? That's a much better question. So I think that was a really excellent question to wrestle with. All right, Elijah, you're the man.
You're not the girl.
What is America? What do we, as citizens of this great country, define ourselves by? Our freedom, our rights, our opinions? What, as the founding fathers of our country, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, etc., what were they trying to create? Well, if we look back further in history, we see that humanity was ruled by usually one opinion, known as an autocracy, which means that there's only one head of rulership. And this was wrong because there was only one opinion and one head. And the opinions and views of others were taken as nothing compared to what only the ruler wanted. And so it makes sense why our founding fathers sought to change this and to make a difference. So they began with eliminating that autocracy way of rulership, and there were rules to be set in place. The opinions of those who followed this law were to be taken as equal valued, and the voice of those who wanted to speak had the right to be heard. And further than this, people aren't supposed to be treated like animals. People are supposed to be guided and to listen, and thus to guide and to teach. But unfortunately, our country has fallen low to what our founding fathers wished to create. People's voice or only speak for themselves. But will you be a part of this downfall? Or will you choose to rise above and not think in terms of I, but think in terms of us? For only together can we build this country up, a country of we the people.
All right. I'll let you guys start this time. Questions, comments?
Wow. Good job. I think you did a really good job presenting, because I feel like it's a lot like if you were reading from a page. And I don't have a question, but I think you did an amazing job.
Thanks.
I don't have a question either, but I think you did very, very well, and you seemed to have a lot of confidence and very structured thoughts. So, yes.
Well, I also think you did a really good job. And I like how you presented it and the authority that you had. I especially like the point that you made with how our society today has kind of fallen away from what our founding fathers have really wanted to see our country become. I think that, like you said, that it's a really worldly, self-centered perspective in most people's minds. That, like, almost people don't want to work together. They only want to live, a life of themselves, and really only get by like what they think. And they don't really want to form a people. So I think, like you were saying, that it's heavily important to come together, all understand that in order to benefit everyone, that we all need to come together in a place like that.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that.
Well, I do feel convicted after your speech. Just even the way that you ended it, and the way, or just your whole presentation made me feel and made me think myself how I can be better in the way that I live my life even, and how we relate to each other. And so I think you did a really good job in making me desire that. And I do want to say that I just see so much my dad in him and the way he speaks, and he's definitely getting that.
Just because he's wearing his jacket.
But yeah, you did a really good job at it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I also think you did very good in your presentation. There wasn't any problems in terms of like the way, like your execution, your way of carrying out what you had planned. I will say that, I mean, it was the points you made were all true and actually quite easy to agree with. I'd say that is because it was in many ways, they were very general points, which was, I think, pretty much the aim of the essay and the presentation anyways. So in that case, there wasn't much for me to, in my mind, try to bring out or to point out for the content of an actual question, because a lot of them were like really general remarks, essentially saying that our society is moved, like, I think the basis of your argument was that the original intent of the founding fathers in building our nation was to bring it from the place that it originally was, which was a place, as you mentioned, of autocracy, where there's only one opinion, one way of thinking, and there's no freedom in the way that we can live our lives and think, and that we are even now moving into a point where that's once again becoming the case in some ways. And that's a really general statement. Like, there weren't like specifics given, which is okay, because otherwise it could have gone on a little too long. So in that sense, I wasn't able to formulate any question to give you, I don't think.
Okay.
But besides that, I think you did a really good job. That's why I was actually hoping Justin would read the essay too, but I guess he's either not planning to do that.
I'm gonna get to that, but I
Okay.
intentionally didn't.
Okay.
And again, intentional on my part, because Esther tends to be more laid back.
Oh.
Elijah tends to be more outgoing.
That's good.
And so this is kind of an opportunity for us to juxtapose styles or temperaments. Because again, the point is not just learning about how to write, but how we interact. So my feedback for you, Elijah, knowing you're a very charismatic young man, I want you to look at the difference in my posture when I'm speaking. This is how you are postured. Okay, so you're taking a posture of what? What does this look like? If I'm standing like this, imagine being in the front row of something. If I'm standing up to Kayla like this, she's probably a little more comfortable because I'm her dad. But so what am I communicating with my body posture? I'm communicating authority, right? You're taking a position of authority, but be very careful of that. Why? Because you're already charismatic. Somebody who is charismatic and outgoing, when you take a position of authority like that, what it can come across as, if you're not careful, is arrogant. Now, I know you, I know your heart, and so that's not really in question for me, because I know that's not what you're trying to put on. But be very guarded. If I was a complete stranger to you, and you were presenting it like that, I wouldn't be as receptive. And so, again, communication is about not just the words that we say, but the posture that we take. And again, I think there's still some nerves there. As much as you're more comfortable, and that was easy to see, I did notice at times you were pacing yourself and having to kind of pull back or recall certain things. But again, you have a tremendous amount of authority. You are more naturally probably somebody who brings people in. So there's a leadership skill set on your life that's just people are naturally drawn to you. I think your sister kind of pointed out you have some mannerisms probably of your dad. That's probably because you look to him and you emulate, and that's a really good thing, super healthy thing. Again, with that, be cautious that you're not trying to be like him. Take the best parts, but also be like yourself, right? And so, again, really, really good job in the way they communicate. So let's, I'll have you stand there and we'll read through the essay here, and we'll find out a little bit more of those details as well. We the people. What is America? What do we do as citizens of this great country? What do we as citizens of this great country define ourselves by? Our freedom? Our rights? Our opinions? What brings us together as a nation? How do we, the people, create, or how should we create, a more perfect union? First, we look back to the beginning, to our founding fathers, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, etc. Through the laws and decrees they set in place, what were the intentions within them? Through the way I see it, I see that an entirely new way of life wished to be established. These men looked back upon the past ways of civilization and rulership and saw that there must be some way to make a difference. Take a moment and look back on what rulership used to be. Ancient Egypt, ancient Rome. Although each empire was undoubtedly powerful and strong, they both fell into poorly ways of rulership and thus became another example of history repeating itself. So what sets the United States of America apart from these past ways? Well, in a straightforward way of looking at it, the older way of governance was a way of autocracy, meaning one person had all the power, like a king or emperor or czar, which made it to where there was only one opinion, one head, regardless of the opinions of those who were to follow the governance. And through this way of rulership, many problems occurred. Most of these problems stemming from disagreement within the people and selfish judgment. So it makes sense why our founding fathers strove to make a difference in the ways of rulership. So what differences were made in our nation? Firstly, the autocracy way of rulership was eliminated, and the opinion of each and every follower of the law was equally placed in value. Laws were to be made not one, but from the opinion and views of all the people. These laws began with Federalist Papers and the amendments, which set in place the new order that the United States wished to establish. But besides the laws and besides the rights, what we're really trying to set in place here? Simply a better way to govern people. Yes, in a sense, but in a different way. People aren't meant to be ruled over. They aren't supposed to be flocked like animals. People are meant to follow and to be guided, and thus to guide. Unfortunately, our government has fallen into chaos, and many who follow this government are not making any effort to better it, but are only furthering the chaos. But what about you? Will you be part of the downfall? Will you take a hand with those who are missing what the foundations of this country were all about? Or will you rise above your own ideas? And not rise alone, but rise holding the hands that hold other hands to raise up people that support what America is all about. America is about freedom and independence, and more than that, it's about brotherhood and community, friendship and concern for the lives other than our own. So as we live life, think not in terms of I, but in terms of us. For only together can we build a better nation, a nation of we, the people.
Wow, you guys are good essay writers, man. Good job. We're good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Clearly, yeah.
Great. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, clearly, I mean, clearly speaking from authority. clearly speaking from charisma. And again, you use the device of asking the question. So it forces the reader into, or the hearer into, reflection. So again, how do we convince people, right? You speak with conviction. But again, a little bit of different style from Esther. And so where Esther is using, again, historical notes and factual stuff to draw the person into an understanding, not using the authority of her own, but was already built up, pulling them in that way. What you're doing is making them reflexive, pulling them into themselves to have to ask the question. What this causes is an internal dialogue to take place. And so it's a really good speaking device. And you do it really well, because the way that you end it, you answer the question for them. And so, again, where many people don't communicate effectively is they'll ask people a bunch of questions, but they'll never get to a resolution. And so the pacing of it, by the way, young man, is perfect. You pace it well enough to give people time. It culminates, it's building, and then very succinctly you answer the question. Not I, but us. For only together can we build a better nation, a nation of we the people. And again, reinforcing kind of the overall title of it. And so, I think you did a phenomenal job. Phenomenal job. I look forward to seeing you work on the craft of speaking. And again, I'll just give you this caution. Those who are charismatic sometimes you will likely have to do much more work than your sister to cultivate the craft of speaking, because there's a natural inclination towards it. And anytime there's a natural inclination towards anything, we have to fight kind of that hidden work that goes on inside of us to become proud in it and to become demanding in it. And so just as kind of a cautionary tale. One thing that I was really struck by was the intentionality of your words. I didn't hear any flippant words. So words that weren't just given away. It wasn't just kind of tongue-in-cheek and just throwing it out there. But I would encourage you to continue to cultivate it, young men, because you have a gift. And again, like both of you, let's see where we're at in time. You can come sit down. We'll have to stop there. Sorry, Benji, you have to go next week. And we'll kind of close this out. So again, the point of using you two, thank you, by the way, as kind of examples is because we have two distinct temperaments and two distinct personalities and two distinct giftings. But is either gifting a better gifting? No. Different giftings. And that's important. But communication, right? As we're communicating ideas and thoughts, and that's kind of the ultimate purpose of constitutional understanding, is that it takes a different types of communication, different styles of temperament, different personalities, in order to really create something that is healthy. There cannot be a healthy culture with a bunch of outgoing, gregarious, charismatic temperaments, right? You get too many Elijahs in a room, what will happen? Well, naturally, somebody will fight for position, right? And so, because you're charismatic, you will battle this. It's not a slight at you at all. I mean, it's who God created you to be. Your natural inclination towards more people like yourself will be to posture. And so that's why I said be cautious of how you posture, because you already command a natural authority or being drawn. Your fight, right? Somebody who's more laid back. The battle you have to fight is to not be pushed to the back, because your natural inclination will be to be accepting of those around you and letting everyone go first. When that happens, you'll get to like calling on you last, and then you'll say things like, we joke about it, right? Like, well, I don't really have anything to offer because everyone's already said what I was going to say. Well, The danger in that can be, if you're not careful, is that you can always be the person that goes last, that doesn't have a voice, that isn't engaging, and it's a safe place to be. But what do we know to be true? Those of us who know you in part, and I know you probably less than everyone here, what I know to be true is that your temperament, because you're observant, you tend to have a much deeper wealth. There is treasure that is there, that is unearthed and hidden. And if you don't, again, fight that natural inclination to pull back, but push yourself forward, the rest of the group, the community as a whole, is blessed by it. As apples of gold and settings of silver, so is a word fitly spoken. So somebody, Esther, of your temperament that brings great value to our community is that you will have a depth of insight that most people won't, because you're much more observant naturally. And so, again, using you two as examples of pretty different personalities, at least as far as public speaking is concerned, because I'm sure you have some similarities. We see that there's great health in both of them, and a need for both of them to be articulated and communicated clearly. There's also, I want us to be observant of the dangers in our own temperaments and personalities and our own giftings and our own strengths. Because if we're not careful, we will give way too much place to those outgoing things, or way too much place to internalize those things. And who is harmed by it? Well, certainly as individuals you will be. But the community suffers. And we don't think of that a lot of times. And again, what the Constitution affords us, a historical understanding of the Constitution, and what they were wrestling for was, there were people who were very outgoing and very gregarious and very charismatic, and those are the people we remember. Right? We remember Thomas Jefferson, and we remember the James Madisons and the George Washingtons and all of these people. We remember them. We don't remember the people that were behind them, who are just as vital. And by the way, those people that were behind, that don't get a lot of the main billing, they were also engaged in conversations. And in some ways, in a lot of ways, those were the people that had to be convinced. And so a healthy culture requires for there to be people who are willing to put themselves out there and risk, and people who are willing to sit back and observe. But what had to take place in order for us to even come up with a document that says we the people in order to form a more perfect union is that those things had to be switched on their head. The person who was outgoing had to learn to sit back and observe and lead by, like you said, guiding maybe people who tended to be more quiet. And it was the quiet people that had to branch out. And so I've got to say, I'm really very pleased, not just with your writing, but with the attention of your understanding and your comprehension of what we're talking about. But let's make no mistake, the purpose of the constitutional study was not so that you had information about American history. It's so that you have insight into what does a culture look like, a healthy culture, and how do you shape a culture? Because cultures will shape themselves naturally. They just will. But we should be intentional about what we're building, correct? We should be mindful about it. And what we know to be true is that the culture that we're after here doesn't come from with our own understanding, with our own hearts, within our own minds, with our own temperaments, with our own personalities. They come from an external source, which means we have to be like Esther, mindful and pulled back and yielding. But we also need to be like Elijah, proclaiming, bold, willing to put themselves out there. Both of those temperaments are really important in shaping culture. And in any healthy culture, what we have to be guarded against is none of you here should be trying to be somebody else. Paul the Apostle said it this way, imitate me, I think it's 1 Corinthians 11:1, imitate me as I also imitate Christ. Paul was not trying to make disciples of Paul. In fact, Corinthians talks about this. Some people say, I'm of Paul, I'm of Apollos. No, the idea of culture is for individuals to be fashioned by God, individually created by God. Your giftings, your strengths, your temperaments, your personalities, and then figuring out how do we sharpen one another? How do we rub up against one another? And that's going to cause conflict. It's going to cause, at times, maybe distrust or things to come forth. Well, those are the things that the Father's working out of us. And so properly understood, what we're after here, from my understanding, is culture building. History, in its purest form, is about understanding how cultures were created and shifted and moved. And if we properly understand history, right, the most famous quote about history is, those who forget their history are condemned to repeat it. If we observe history rightly, we are then better equipped to navigate the cultural barriers we're faced with today. And so I want you to reflect upon this, and we'll close it here, a few minutes short. I want you to reflect upon the culture. And not just obviously the culture of God. What is Emmanuel and Tim speaking about? And really the Father using them as vessels to teach, right? But then take a step back from that culture. What are we after? And then think in terms of all the other cultures you're a part of. You're a part of your own family dynamic. You're a part of this generational culture, how you interact. You're part of a culture that has a responsibility, right, to those outside of you. And so those could be friends who don't know the Lord. Those could be friends who have maybe a misunderstanding of who the Father really is. You play a part in that. And it's not like, Christianity has done a really poor job of evangelizing, in a sense, because what Christianity has done is it's promoted kind of this idea of you got to go out and get people saved. Well, the Bible doesn't really teach that. Jesus says, go into all the world and make disciples. They're not our disciples. What really is being talked about is, right, sonship. It's inviting people into sonship. And so how do we do that? Well, we do that, again, by understanding our role within the context of a culture, by having a voice, right? It is certainly the way we live, and the way that we live should match up with the words we speak. And often that is not just found in the successes that we have, but it's in how we deal with the strain and difficulty of each day. And so I want to encourage all of you guys. You've done a phenomenal job here, the study part of it. These essays, fantastic. So far, the oral presentations are great. But we have failed. I have failed as a teacher here if we don't take the lessons that we've studied in history and seek to apply them to our everyday life. And again, I'm going to press you. I've done this a couple times. I want to press you in the midst of our people. How are you relating one to another? Is this generation? You guys represented here. How do you relate with one another? And I don't know. I mean, my question would be, do you this, I'll borrow Elijah's way of communicating. Is your communication one to another based on deeply spiritual and truthful things? Or does it tend to go to more superficial, secular things? And it's not about the time that is spent on those things, but it's about the depth. And so let me just invite you into some discussions or some thoughts. Because again, you are part of a community who is not setting out to fashion something for itself, but is following a way, a pattern of life that is radically different than most people. This would never be a discussion in a high school history class, ever. None that I've known. And not even in most Christian history classes. And so I really want to encourage you and challenge you from my observation. And and I've been wrong at least twice before. My observation of you all as a group is, I think second guessing yourselves a lot. And what I observe is a hesitancy to truly engage. And I say that, I want you to hear my heart, in love without judgment. Because if I could just be honest with you, you guys are so far ahead of where I was at your age. I mean, you are light years ahead. But as somebody who has traveled down the wrong path of the road, and I mean, Jesus was not even nearly on the same path of where I was headed. I can tell you with great confidence, there are things that you are all faced with that require your utmost attention and utmost sincerity. And I wish, I'm going to give you the dad speech here, I wish that I had the opportunity that you all have before you when I was your age. But praise God, I didn't. And I'm here still, and the Lord is good either way. But if I can just offer for you to think about in our conversation of we the people and creating a more perfect union, what does that actually mean to you as a people of God, as sons of God? What does that actually mean in the way you interact with your siblings, with those outside of your household, with those outside of the household of faith, outside of our community? Because this conversation should have stirred up, at least in part, some thought and action towards the things of God, if it was rightly discussed and discerned. And if it hasn't, I apologize for that, for my failings in not teaching you that. But I trust that God will make up for anything that is lacking in me in my communication. But I do want to say I'm very proud of the work that's being put forth and the engagement that's being put forward. And I want to encourage you all to run the risk of being vocal in what you're thinking and feeling. Because discussion is so vital to healthy community.
Engage.
Yeah,
Engage.
absolutely, yeah. And if we're not willing to engage, what we effectively saying is we're not willing to work towards healthy things. All right, that's it. It's lunchtime. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I don't have lunch, man.
You don't have lunch?
We have some stuff you could